Trying to bound the realm of counseling and the sort of things that counselors do. This is a topic close to my own heart because right after graduation from college, I worked at McLean Hospital in Belmont for 2 years as a lowly mental health worker, nonetheless deeply involved in the whole clinical process there. We need guidance for handling the complexity of life. We need wisdom for understanding just the myriad issues that beset us day to day. And so one of the most valuable things counselors can do is just to be that voice of reason, to be a little aisle of sane advice in a world which is just speaking with so many unhelpful voices. On the other hand, while again, we don't typically meet with a scene quite as dramatic as that of the Gerasene demoniac, I think seasoned counselors will sadly recognize a lot of familiar traits here in those who are profoundly disturbed. The infatuation with death, right? Like just a complete, in this case, literal immersion amongst the tombs. But even when you don't get it to that extreme, there's this obsession often with death, the self-harm, cutting himself with pieces, so tormented that he's beginning to take it out on himself. And again, it's always been a feature, I suppose, of the landscape of mental health, but I wouldn't be surprised if our experts could inform us that it's maybe even on the increase, these acts of self-harm. And the isolation from society, right? That they're trying to physically restrain the guy, both to protect themselves and perhaps to protect him as well. But he's got this just rage and torment within him that leads him to break those bonds and just to rush out into the wilderness. All illness is isolating, but mental illness is profoundly isolating, right? You don't feel like you belong, so you throw yourself out. People would rather not deal with you, so they don't actually want you around messing up their apparently well-ordered lives. And so this idea of social exclusion is profoundly there as well. And so, as I said, this is not simply a story from a long time ago when strange things happened, or at least they told strange stories about people. This is sadly pretty clinically demonstrable, again, in the worst case scenarios. It's pretty evident from any encounter with people who are troubled, whether they're mildly troubled and need some help getting along in life, or so profoundly troubled that whether in the ancient world or the modern world, we really don't know what to do, that we need wisdom to help these people, and we need the power of God to help these people. And just as in physical healings, we're encouraged by those displays of miraculous power, but that doesn't always happen. These are signs pointing to ultimate restoration, not guarantees that if you follow the right formula, everything's going to be fine. Nonetheless, counselors can go about their job knowing that Jesus is there to provide the wisdom they need day to day, and Jesus is also there to provide the power for profound healing, even and perhaps especially in those cases where we just don't know what to do. Without further ado, let's invite our distinguished panelist up.
Hi, my name is John Sikowski, for those of you who don't know me. I actually started my adult life as a special education teacher, and one of the jobs that I got at the time was working with emotionally disturbed teenagers, and was the teacher that was helping them when they were out of school in residential treatment, or helping them reintegrate back into school, or getting their GEDs, things like that. And I found that I had a much greater heart for the counseling end of the job than I did for the teaching end of the job. I also discovered that teaching is incredibly hard work, and I don't want to work that hard. So I ended up going back to school, to Boston College, and getting my master's in social work. I'm a clinical social worker, and have been doing counseling ever since, both in hospitals, clinics, prisons, and for the past 20 years in private practice. I work with a lot of folks that have addiction issues, alcoholism. I do a lot of marriage counseling and things like that. But the part that I think is most important in my story is the heart that I feel for how we treat mental illness, how we think about it. Because again, it's sort of, when I was working with those kids all those years ago, I saw people who would look at them, and always feel this sort of disgust and frustration, as if people were doing, were trying to be that way. And if you have a kid who gets cancer, everybody will surround you and support you and care for you, and there'll be fun drives and pledges and walks. But if you have a kid with addiction or mental illness, like, you're all alone. And people start thinking like, oh, I think it's the parents' fault and that kind of thing. And I just feel the shame and the isolation of mental health is something that breaks my heart all the time. For those of you who think about things like the demonic possession, I would encourage you to read Susan Cahalan's book, Brain on Fire, and there's a movie about it as well, to kind of think about the kind of things that can happen to us physically. Now, I'm not saying there isn't such thing as demonic possession. I actually think there is. But at the same time, there are so many broken things in this world that can make our hearts sick and our bodies sick. But there are so many things that make our brains sick, too. I also think that the greatest healing in counseling has to do with relationship. And when I think about reading the stories of Jesus, what I always see is the way he related to people. I mean, it was just so, at times he was so direct and blunt and really driving home a point, and at other times filled with such incredible compassion. And I always love it when they show these studies that say that people who are in the hospital, the people that have a lot of family and friends visit, and the people that are seen as having deep faith, tend to have shorter hospital stays. And I think, well, yeah, of course that is. Because there's something about community and relationship that is actually very physically healing to us. It is the best thing that one of the best things that I think God gave us. We're not built to be isolated. And people who need the most in terms of relationship, those people with addiction, mental health issues, everything from mild depression to severe problems, what they need is relationship, and those are the people we don't want to spend time with. It isn't that I can specifically bring up issues of faith, although, and I say I'm surprised, but I'm not really surprised how often issues of faith come up in the conversations. It's constant. I've had non-Christian people come up, and within the first or second session, they would say to me, let me ask you a question. Do you go to church? Right? Things like that happen all the time in the office. So I'm always being invited into the conversation, which is interesting to me. And I have really enjoyed the fact that I've watched a lot of people who I think I would have considered to be nominal Christians or church-going Christians, who in their time in therapy over some other issue return to church.
My name is Yuko and I'm a vocational rehabilitation counselor. I work for the state. I'm a poor state worker. So my job is to help people with any type of disabilities, including physical, mental, cognitive, any type of disabilities, to become more employable, more independent. I have done this job for 14 years, and I still love it. I was born with my visual impairment, and in Japan, it's hard to live with disabilities, but my parents gave me these wonderful parents who are atypical. I think in Japan, if you have your family member has disability, it's considered like a shame. But my parents were so encouraging. They let me believe I can do anything in my life. I always wanted to help people who are in same situation, and then I believed that they can be more independent. So I went to college in Japan, majored in sociology, and then I mostly did social work, and then it wasn't right. And then I went to master's degree in psychology, and then it still didn't feel right. And then during my master's program, I realized, oh, there's such thing as rehabilitation counseling in America. And then I said, I'm going. So that's how I got here. And after I finished my master's degree, I'm now practicing what I was educated for. So my faith, I pray for my clients. I have a caseload of 200 with age range between 16, high school students to, somebody in their 70s. As long as they want to work, we help them. And as a state worker, I can't obviously pray, but I discreetly pray for my clients. And then I believe in the power of prayer like that. People come see me with despair. The life is hard in general, but more so if you have disabilities. The clients I have really reflects the society, and then I can't even tell you, type of the, heart that they already experience. But then how much can I do? I only have 30 minutes, 1 hour to see them. I have to send them back to this nasty world. But then, empowerment, encouragement that Jesus would do to them. So I like the fact that clients come, some clients come crying, and then I have a box of tissue always that I sometimes have to use. But then, when they leave, their back's not hunchback anymore. They smile. And then, at the end of service, we have received the benediction, and then we go out and spread the words. I feel like that's what we have to do to encourage our clients. And then I trust that my faith helps me to send out my clients with a little bit of encouragement and empowerment.
My name is Reed Swetland, and I work as a mental health counselor at the Gordon College Counseling Center. And for a number of years, I was also splitting my time between Gordon College and an outpatient mental health clinic in Ipswich, where really got my hands dirty in a great way. But I ended up in counseling, I should say, sort of in a roundabout way. When I started college, I was really most interested in the idea of change and how change happens. And so I was a politics major all 4 years. But it was during that time that I realized I was probably more suited for being involved in change at a more of a microcosmic personal level than I was at sort of the macro systemic level. And then went into social work afterwards. Had a brief job working with adults with developmental disabilities, and then went into residential care. Worked at a program in Portsmouth, New Hampshire for about 2 years. Kids who were on what was called a CHINS petition, a child in need of services. And so they were, for various reasons, they weren't able to live in their homes. And so we provided the right amount of support and education and counseling. And then when I moved to Seattle, I continued in residential care and worked in a program for juvenile criminal sex offenders. These were kids who were 12 to 18 years old who had been adjudicated. They were in our program because they had completed a portion of their sentence and were deemed safe to be residing in the community, but living in a residential supportive therapeutic community. So we provided education and continued counseling. And that's when I decided after 4 years there to get serious about counseling, and I came back east, got my degree in counseling from Gordon Conwell, and I've been at Gordon College since 1999. My faith obviously incorporates into the work that I do, but it's in kind of a, I think, very crafted way, and that is, I've always used this image of in my approach to counseling of being something of like a farmer. I don't have any farming background whatsoever, but I think about seasons of life, and we all have seasons of life. And particularly in my work at the college, where I'm seeing students, ages 18 to 22 generally, that a lot of times this is the first time they've ever done anything related to counseling. And so, but for many, it's just a continuation of counseling. But I don't know what season of life they're in. And so for many people, I am really sort of tilling the soil and I'm removing rocks. And I know that somebody else after me is, through the work of the Holy Spirit, is going to continue that progress that person is making. Sometimes I'm the person who's just planting seeds, and other times I maintain things with water and sunshine, and probably a certain amount of manure as well. Probably. And at other times I get to be with people in their times of harvest, and that's a real blessing to be a part of that. But more than anything, it's just a privilege to be able to be alongside people when they're wanting to make a change. I mean, that's a real divine privilege. But I guess most of the time I think about that image of farming as something akin to what Jesus does, and that is he meets people in their place of need, where they need to be met, and really helps them in moving forward. But that growth is often slow. It doesn't always take place right away. Sometimes it does, but a lot of times it doesn't. I think on a practical level, that's kind of more of a theoretical, but on a practical level, one of my daily prayers as I drive into work is, not my words, Lord, yours. Speak through me.
Okay, I'm Sue Goodhue. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. How I got into this field, it's a long story, but I'll make it as short as I possibly can. I was not raised in a Christian home. I came to the Lord about 30 years ago, and it was during a period of time in our lives where there was a good bit of mental illness in our family, and mine included. Individually for me, I had been suffering for 20 years from an anxiety disorder called agoraphobia. And I would have panic attacks if I went into a place where there were too many people. I found that I couldn't go into heavy gatherings of people. I would just get these panic attacks and I had to run out the door. I couldn't drive on highways. If I came to church, I had to sit in the back row and be ready to slip out the door as soon as I'd get a panic attack. And I certainly could never, ever, ever in my wildest dreams address a group of people as I'm doing this morning, or even when I teach sometimes at Sunlight Bible Study, the ladies on Tuesday mornings. I never dreamed that would ever be possible. So coming from that perspective, I found that I entered an organization that really helped me see that God was not the punitive, fearsome God of my youth. He wasn't a God that I needed to truly fear, not in awe and respect, but truly fear. And this organization taught me that he was a loving God and that he wanted to help me, and that all I needed to do was to ask and believe in him, number one, and believe in his love for me, and then ask for his help. So I began asking. And at the time I was a travel agent. It was a fun job for a while, until people started blaming me because the sun didn't shine on their vacation. But it was a fun job. But as I moved into my faith and I became, deeper into it, I thought, Lord, I don't feel like I'm really honoring you in this field. I want to do some kind of job or work or profession, some way that I can serve you better. And so I prayed that prayer for a couple of years, and I really feel whether he really spoke to me or whether it was his spirit, but I just felt his pushing me toward this profession, this counseling profession. And so I called a woman who had counseled me years before, a wonderful Christian counselor who had counseled me years before. And she said, "Did you ever think of going to the seminary?" And I thought, the seminary? Are you kidding? The Lord's not calling me to be a minister, I don't think. I think he's just calling me to be a counselor. She said, no, they have a wonderful master's program in counseling, and they integrate the faith, our theology with the psychology. And my heart just jumped out of my chest. I thought, wow. So I called the admissions office, and this kindly lady told me that I had already missed the admissions date for that year, but I could come in and file my application for probably the next year. And so I tried to explain to her, I said, well, I'm 54 years old, and I don't know how long this process is going to take, and I don't know how long I've got. I was kind of hoping I could start it a little sooner. And she said, well, let me talk to Dr. Pendleton. The next day I met with Dr. Pendleton, and I was in, and I was just so thrilled. And I have to tell you this story, the first class I was in was with Pablo Polachek, our dear beloved Dr. Polachek, and it was called Theories of Personality. And I had no idea what this class was going to be about, nothing. And he started the class by saying, I'm going to go around the room and I'm going to ask each one of you what you hope to gain from this class. And since I had no idea what this class was about, I had no idea what I should say. So when it came my turn, I thought, okay, Lord, I'm just going to be honest. And I said, well, frankly, Dr. Polachek, what I am hoping and praying for is just mercy. I haven't been in school in 37 years, and I don't know if my brain still works. And he assured me that it probably did. And it did, because 3 years later, I entered the seminary in 1995 at the age of 54. I graduated in 2000 at the age of 57, and I have been counseling for 17 years. And if you do the math, I'm probably ready for retirement, actually. But the Lord hasn't led me there yet, so that's my story. I think when I came into this profession, I was really almost weighted down by the responsibility of it. The fear of maybe leading someone astray or not giving them the help that they needed. And so it meant a lot of prayer on my part. I just can't tell you how often I am listening to someone in my office, and I'm praying to the Lord at the same time. Oh Lord, please, where they're going with this, show me what I need to respond. Give me the wisdom, because right now I'm sitting here thinking I don't know what to do, and I don't know where to go with it, but I know I want to help them, and I understand the huge responsibility that this is. Should I never, Father, lead someone in the wrong direction? So with that in mind, however, I think when I do think of the Holy Spirit is the great counselor. David Wells wrote a wonderful book about that, the Holy Spirit, the great counselor. And so I appeal to the Holy Spirit, please live in me, be in me, speak through me. But with that said, because I'm a marriage and family therapist, I have a tendency to have more than one client in the office at one time. I do a lot of couples work. Once in a while, if I'm really lucky, I get a whole family who will come in, but that's very rare. But I do a lot of couples work, and what I find, it is so much easier to deal with people who are Christians. And because my Christian community knows that I'm a Christian and I'm a counselor, that's where I get a lot of my clients from. So when people come in, they already know I'm a Christian, so we can begin at that level. But when secular people come in, and I certainly have a lot of those clients as well, I have to start with, at the intake, I can ask them, where do you get your strength when you're going through difficult times? Have you ever had a faith? If you do, what was it? And get them talking about it. And sometimes that'll open the door for me to be able to speak on that level, because I agree with them. The state of Massachusetts will take my license away if I try to apostatize about Christ or other things. So that is a great help to be able to, if I'm sitting with a Christian couple, I know that at least they're coming from the same foundation. They're standing on the same rock, and we can appeal to that when we're doing this work. But when I'm dealing with secular people and I ask them, where do you get your strength from? And I have two people sitting in front of me, very angry at each other and deciding whether they're going to divorce or not. And they say to me, I'm making the rules, and this is my assumption of the way I think things should be, and the other person's, in the reverse. It's very difficult to deal with people like that, because you have to bring them back to a level where, do you understand that you really aren't in control? Do you understand that, that marriage is about a balance, and it's a love, and so dealing with Christian people is so much easier, Christian clients, than dealing with people who have no faith at all. And that's where I think I get my strength, and I appeal to the Lord that that's where His strength will come in as well for them. I know I'm not doing this, and I'm not doing this alone. I absolutely do not have the wisdom that I can answer anyone's problem that comes through my door. I have to depend on God, and I have to depend on His Holy Spirit to lead and guide me, because I'm just not that bright. Thank you very much. Thank you.